Have you ever wondered what secrets a millionaire might hide? Millionaire followed his black maid after work. What he discovered changed everything. Diana, I need you to empty your pockets now. William Harrison's voice cut through the silence of the mansion like a cold blade. At 62, the real estate mogul stood in the kitchen doorway, blocking the exit of the maid who had worked for him for 8 months. Diana Thompson, a 35-year-old black woman, stopped drying her hands on the dish towel and turned slowly. Her eyes met his with a disturbing calm. Not the panic William had expected to see, but something that seemed almost prepared. Is there a problem, Mr. Harrison? Her voice maintained its usual professional serenity. But there was something different in her tone, a subtle firmness that William had never noticed before. My wife says a diamond bracelet is missing from her bedroom, a bracelet worth over $15,000. He crossed his arms, letting the accusation hang in the heavy air of the kitchen. You were the only person who cleaned there today. William Harrison had built a real estate empire based on the premise that people like Diana were predictable, controllable, and easily intimidated. In his companies, he had fired dozens of black employees with similar accusations over the years, always managing to get them to leave quietly, afraid of lawsuits or tarnishing their professional records. Can a single moment turn the tables on a powerful man? Diana nodded slowly, as if processing completely new information, but her fingers didn't tremble for a second as she carefully folded the dish towel. And you automatically thought of me. Interesting. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, William continued, his voice taking on the condescending tone he used in business negotiations. I know you have a daughter to support. I know things are tight. Maybe you just got confused about what was yours. Then Diana did something unexpected. She smiled. Not a submissive or nervous smile, but the kind of smile someone gives when they finally receive confirmation of something they've suspected for a long time. Mr. Harrison, she said, taking her phone out of her pocket with deliberately slow movements. Before you empty my pockets, how about we call the police? I'm sure they'd love to investigate a $15,000 theft. William hesitated. There was something about Diana's demeanor that didn't fit the script he had imagined. A guilty maid should be begging, apologizing, trying to negotiate, not offering to call the police with the confidence of a seasoned lawyer. Over the past 8 months, Diana had watched William carefully. She had noticed how he treated the Hispanic gardeners, how he spoke to the black delivery man at the pharmacy, how his eyes filled with automatic contempt whenever people like her entered his privileged world. She had listened to his phone conversations about lazy people who just want handouts from the government and his theories about how certain people were naturally inclined to crime. That's not necessary if you just cooperate. And oh, but I insist. Diana interrupted him. And for the first time in 8 months, William realized that she was no longer speaking like a maid. Actually, I have some very interesting things to show the officers when they arrive. Diana's phone vibrated with a message. She glanced at the screen and her smile widened in a way that made William feel suddenly uncomfortable in his own home. Ah, perfect timing, she murmured, typing a quick reply. Looks like I'm going to have visitors earlier than expected tonight. William watched confused as Diana put her phone away and finally began emptying the pockets of her uniform. House keys, a pack of gum, a used tissue, and nothing else. No diamond bracelet, no evidence of theft. Satisfied? She asked, holding out her empty hands. But before William could respond, the doorbell rang, and then it rang again and again. The sound echoed through the mansion like an ominous warning, each ring seeming more insistent than the last. I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, Diana said, walking toward the door with a confidence that left William completely flustered. But I have a feeling our conversation is just getting started. As she headed for the door, William stood there, realizing for the first time that maybe, just maybe, he had completely underestimated the woman who had been cleaning his house for 8 months. There was something about the way Diana walked, as if each step was calculated, as if she knew exactly what was about to happen. As if that accusation wasn't a devastating surprise, but rather the moment she had been waiting patiently for all these months. From the hallway came multiple voices, some speaking English, others Spanish. William frowned, trying to identify how many people Diana had let into his house. And why on earth did she have keys to do that? Mr. Harrison, Diana's voice echoed from the entrance hall, now laden with an authority he had never heard before. Would you join us in the living room? We have a lot to talk about. For the first time in decades, William Harrison felt that he was not in control of the situation. And most disturbing of all was that Diana seemed to be orchestrating every second of that moment with the precision of someone who had planned this for much longer than he could imagine. If you're enjoying this story of how appearances can be deceiving and justice can come from where we least expect it, be sure to subscribe to Black Voices to find out how a simple accusation would become the catalyst for a revelation that would change the lives of everyone involved forever. William followed Diana into the living room where he found a group of people he definitely hadn't authorized to enter his home. 3 black women of varying ages sat comfortably on his Italian leather sofa while a man in an impeccable suit organized papers on his coffee table. What the hell is going on here? William exploded, his voice echoing off the walls covered in expensive art. Diana, who are these people, and how did they get into my house? Mr. Harrison, Diana said, her voice maintaining the disturbing calm. I'd like to introduce you to Mrs. Johnson, who worked for you 2 years ago, Mrs. Williams, who lasted only 6 months, and Mrs. Davis, who had the pleasure of cleaning this house for 4 years before she was accused of stealing a ring that later turned up in your wife's car. William felt the blood drain from his veins. Those faces, he vaguely remembered them all. Maids he had fired for suspected theft over the years. Women who had left his house in shame, without references, their reputations destroyed. And this, Diana continued, pointing to the man in the suit, is Dr. Michael Roberts, an attorney specializing in employment rights and racial discrimination. Dr. Roberts stood up, extending his hand, which William completely ignored. Mr. Harrison, for the past 8 months, my client Diana Thompson has meticulously documented a pattern of racial discrimination and false accusations against black maids in this residence. That's ridiculous, William shouted, his face turning red. I have every right to protect my property. If things go missing and these people are the only ones with access, it's obvious that, what? Diana interrupted him, her voice now laden with a controlled fury that made William take a step back. That black women are naturally thieves. That we don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. That our families, our needs, our characters are automatically suspect. Mrs. Johnson, a woman in her 60s, spoke for the first time. You accused me of stealing $500 from your office. You said I was typical of my people and that I should know my place. I lost my job, my reference, and almost lost my home because no one else would hire me. I found the money a week later, William muttered, unable to look her in the eye. It was in my coat pocket. But you never called me, Mrs. Johnson continued. You never apologized. You never tried to make amends. Diana walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured garden. For 8 months, she had worked in this house not only as a maid, but as a silent investigator. With a degree in investigative journalism, she had lost her job at a local newspaper when she began looking into discriminatory practices among Seattle's elite. Financially devastated, she had taken a housekeeping job as a way to survive and then discovered that William Harrison was exactly the kind of man she used to write about. Do you know what the first thing that caught my attention was, Mr. Harrison? Diana turned, her eyes flashing with an intensity that made William feel like a cornered rat. It was when I heard you on the phone with your lawyer, laughing about how easy it was to get rid of the colored help whenever you needed a scapegoat. William swallowed hard. He vaguely remembered that conversation, but he hadn't imagined anyone could have heard. Or maybe it was when I saw you tell your accountant that mysterious losses were a great excuse for layoffs, and I quote, keeping those people away from respectable families. Dr. Roberts opened a folder and spread documents across the table. For 8 months, Diana recorded conversations, photographed evidence, and collected statements. We have records of at least 12 black maids fired for false accusations of theft in the last 5 years. You can't prove anything, William said. But his voice no longer had the same arrogant authority as before. Actually, we can. Diana smiled, taking out her phone. Like that conversation 3 weeks ago when you told your wife you'd found a particularly suspicious black woman to hire because you needed someone to blame when the next incident happened. Diana's phone played William's unmistakable voice. This Diana seems perfect. She looks like she'd steal if she had the chance. When we need a scapegoat, she'll be perfect. Those people always have a relative who needs money." The silence that followed was deafening. William looked around the room, seeing his years of arrogance and prejudice reflected in the determined faces of the women in front of him. "My wife's bracelet," he whispered, still trying to maintain some control of the situation, "is still missing." "You can't deny that." Diana walked over to the fireplace and picked something up from behind a picture frame. The diamond bracelet sparkled in the light, each stone reflecting the look of shock on William's face. "It was exactly where your wife left it," Diana said calmly. "Behind your wedding photo. She took it out last night before she showered and forgot. I found it this morning while cleaning, but I decided to wait and see how far your racist imagination would take you." William felt his legs go weak. For 8 months, he had completely underestimated the woman who cleaned his house, treating her like a disposable object in his world of privilege. Now, watching the steely determination in Diana's eyes and the growing pile of evidence against him, William Harrison realized he had fallen into a trap he had built himself with years of prejudice and cruelty. Each new humiliation only strengthened something inside Diana that her oppressors couldn't see. A silent strength fueled by the very injustice they sought to impose on her. What this privileged man didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing his own sentence of defeat, and that the woman he had chosen as his victim was, in fact, the most dangerous person he could have ever crossed paths with. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," William said, his voice regaining some of its usual arrogance as he picked up his phone. "I have lawyers, contacts, and the police, judges who owe me favors. You think you can just barge into my house and threaten me?" Diana watched with genuine interest as William dialed quickly. For 8 months, she had studied his every move, every contact, every tactic he used to silence his victims. She knew exactly who he was calling before he even completed the call. "Harvey, it's me, William Harrison. I need you to come to my house immediately. I have some people here making absurd accusations." And William's voice trailed off as he listened to the response on the other end of the line. His face went from red with anger to a worried paler. "What do you mean you can't represent me? We've been friends for 20 years, Harvey." William pressed the phone to his ear as if that could change the answer he was getting. "Conflict of interest. What the hell does that mean?" Dr. Roberts smiled discreetly as he organized more documents. "Mr. Harrison, I can explain. My office already formally represents Miss Thompson and all of the other women present today. Any attorney who takes your case now will face serious ethical issues." William tried 3 more calls. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Embarrassed apologies, claims of busy schedules, sudden conflicts of interest that no one could explain properly. In less than 15 minutes, William Harrison, a man accustomed to having any door open with a simple phone call, was completely isolated. "How did you do this?" he asked, his voice now heavy with desperate anger. Diana walked over to William's bookcase, running her fingers over the expensive volumes he collected more for status than for knowledge. "Mr. Harrison, for 8 months, I didn't just clean your house. I studied you. Every phone call you made in my presence, every name you mentioned, every favor you asked or offered." She pulled a small digital recorder from behind one of the books. Then another, and another. William watched in horror as Diana collected devices from nearly every shelf. "I discovered that you have an interesting habit of making your most compromising phone calls in the library. Always on Thursday mornings while I was supposed to be vacuuming the hallway." Diana placed the recorders on the coffee table. 8 months of conversations. 8 months of you bragging about how you manipulate municipal contracts, how you bribe inspectors, how you use inside information for your real estate speculation. Mrs. Davis, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke up. "She came to me 6 months ago. She said she knew I was innocent and that she had a plan to prove it. At first, I thought she was crazy, a maid planning to take down a millionaire. But Diana isn't just a housekeeper," Dr. Roberts added, opening a new folder. "She's an investigative journalist, a Columbia University graduate, specializing in exposing corruption among the elite. She lost her job at the Seattle Herald when she began investigating discriminatory practices at companies like yours. William felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. For 8 months, he had treated an investigative journalist like a mere cleaning lady. He had spoken freely about his schemes in the presence of the one person who had the skills and motivation to destroy him completely. The Maid job, Diana continued, was just a cover. I needed direct access to your life, your conversations, your habits, and you gave me all that on a silver platter because you could never see past the color of my skin and the uniform I wore. Diana showed him her phone where a live stream was playing. Right now, 15,000 people are watching our conversation on Instagram. Every word you said about getting rid of the colored help is being shared in real time. The number of viewers continue to rise. 16,000, 18,000, 22,000 comments scrolled quickly across the screen. Most expressing outrage and demanding justice for the women present. My followers, Diana explained calmly, are mostly journalists, activists, and people who follow my investigative work. They know an important story when they see one. William tried to step forward to end the broadcast, but Dr. Roberts stood up, blocking his path. Mr. Harrison, any attempt to interfere with our documentation of this conversation will be considered witness intimidation. You destroyed my reputation, William shouted, his composure finally breaking completely. 20 years of building my name, my connections, my businesses, and you ruined it all in one afternoon. No, Diana replied with a serenity that contrasted brutally with William's desperation. You destroyed your own reputation with years of racism, discrimination, and cruelty. We merely documented and exposed who you really are behind your facade of respectability. Ms. Johnson took an envelope out of her pocket. Diana helped me file a proper lawsuit against you, not just for wrongful termination, but for emotional distress, defamation, and racial discrimination. My lawyers say that with the evidence she gathered, the case is practically a sure thing. We're all suing, added Mrs. Williams. Diana helped us understand our rights, connected us with specialized lawyers, and documented evidence we didn't even know existed. William looked around the room, his room, and realized he had completely lost control of the situation. Every person there had pieces of a puzzle he didn't even know was being assembled. For 8 months, Diana had meticulously orchestrated his downfall, using his own arrogance and prejudices as weapons against him. His phone vibrated with constant notifications. Messages from business partners, golf club members, high society acquaintances, all questioning the videos circulating on social media. His secretary had sent 12 urgent messages about reporters calling the office. Harrison Properties is already getting calls, Diana observed, reading the notifications on her own phone. Looks like 3 big contracts have been cancelled at the last minute. Funny how quickly people distance themselves when the truth comes out. That was when William realized that moment in the kitchen when Diana had offered to call the police with such confidence had not been a spontaneous reaction. It had been the final moment of a plan months in the making. Executed with the precision of someone who had anticipated his every move. Under the weight of all those determined stares, William finally understood the magnitude of what he was facing. This wasn't just a maid seeking justice. It was an experienced professional who had used his own arrogance to build the perfect case against him. But as the comments on the live broadcast multiplied and his reputation crumbled in real time, one question haunted William Harrison. If Diana had planned all of this with such precision, what else does she know about him that she hadn't revealed yet? Stop this broadcast now, William shouted, lunging toward Diana's phone. But Dr. Roberts quickly stepped between them. Mr. Harrison. Any attempt to interfere with the documentation of this conversation will be interpreted as witness intimidation, the lawyer said calmly, as the number of viewers on the live stream surpassed 30,000. Diana watched with scientific fascination as William collapsed. For 8 months, she had studied his every reaction, every tactic he used when he felt cornered. She knew exactly what was coming next. You don't understand, William yelled, his face now completely red. I am William Harrison. I built half this city. You are? You are. We're what? Diana asked, her voice cutting like a knife. Troublesome black women who don't know their place. Go on, Mr. Harrison. 35,000 people are listening. William's phone kept vibrating. Panicked messages from his secretary. TV stations are calling. Partners demanding emergency meeting. Company stock plummeting. Diana. He tried one last time, his voice taking on a pleading tone. We can work this out civilly. How much do you want? 50,000? 100,000 each. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Diana looked at the other women, who returned her gaze with expressions of utter disbelief. He still doesn't get it, Mrs. Johnson muttered, shaking her head. Diana walked over to her purse and pulled out a thick folder. Mr. Harrison, for 8 months, I have documented not only your racist conversations, but the full extent of your schemes. Would you like to see? She spread photographs across the coffee table. William recognized them immediately. Pictures of him handing envelopes to city inspectors, falsified documents about safety on his construction sites, fraudulent contracts with the city government. How did you get these pictures? His voice was now just a horrified whisper. Remember when I told you I needed to work on the weekends to pay for my daughter's college? Diana smiled coldly. Well, my daughter graduated 5 years ago. On the weekends, I was following you to your confidential meetings. Dr. Roberts opened another file. We also have bank records showing irregular payments, recordings of you promising city jobs in exchange for political favors, and evidence that you overcharged for at least 12 public projects in the last 3 years. William slumped into an armchair, finally understanding the magnitude of what he was facing. You've been investigating me for 8 months. You pretended to be a maid to destroy me. Not to destroy you, Diana corrected, her voice taking on an almost professorial tone. To expose you for who you really are. The difference is subtle but important. Her phone rang. Diana answered, putting it on speakerphone. Diana, this is Rebecca Chun from the Seattle Herald. We're preparing a cover story on racial discrimination among Seattle's elite. Can we schedule an interview? Sure, Rebecca. I have a lot of material to share. More calls followed. CNN, The Washington Post, NBC News, each one increasing the desperation visible in William's eyes. You know what the most ironic part is? Diana continued calmly, putting away the documents. If you had simply treated me with basic dignity, none of this would have happened. I was just trying to support my family and do my job. But you couldn't see past the color of my skin. The live broadcast now had over 50,000 viewers. Comments flowed rapidly. Justice at last. That man is disgusting. Diana is a hero. William tried one last desperate card. You know I'm going to sue you all for defamation, invasion of privacy, conspiracy. With what lawyers? Dr. Roberts asked sarcastically. His 5 usual law firms have already informed us that they cannot represent him due to conflicts of interest. And with what money? Added Diana. Because according to my calculations, between the lawsuits we're going to file, the criminal investigations that will follow, and the flight of investors that has already begun, Harrison Properties will be out of business within 6 months. Just then, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was 2 detectives from the Seattle Police Department. Mr. Harrison, said the older detective, we need to talk to you about some irregularities in municipal contracts. We have a search warrant. William looked around the room, his room now filled with evidence of his crimes, witnesses to his discrimination, and cameras broadcasting his humiliation live to tens of thousands of people. How, he whispered to Diana. How did you orchestrate all this with such precision? Diana stood up, adjusting her blouse with the same dignity she had maintained during 8 months of silent humiliation. Simple, Mr. Harrison. You completely underestimated me because you could never see beyond your prejudices. To you, I was just another black maid, invisible, ignorant, disposable. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door, pausing only to say goodbye to the other women who would finally get justice. The irony is that if you had ever truly known me, you would have discovered that I was the last person in the world you should have chosen as an enemy. As detectives began searching the house and the live broadcast continued to document every moment of William Harrison's spectacular fall, one question hung in the air. Was it possible that a man who had spent decades building walls of privilege and prejudice had finally learned that true strength comes from those he had tried to keep invisible? Or would his arrogance prevent him from accepting the lesson, even in the face of his own ruin? 6 months later, Diana Thompson sat in her new office on the 22nd floor of downtown Seattle, looking out the panoramic window at the city below. The position of Director of Investigative Journalism at the Seattle Herald came with not only a salary that tripled her income, but the recognition she had always deserved. The story that exposed William Harrison had become a national landmark on racial discrimination and abuse of power. 3 universities had already offered her chairs to teach investigative journalism, and her book, Invisible by Design: How the Elite Perpetuate Racism, had been on the bestseller list for 16 consecutive weeks. Across town, William Harrison walked through the nearly empty hallways of what remained of Harrison Properties. Of his 87 properties, only 12 remained under his control after the lawsuits. The criminal investigation resulted in 3 formal charges: tax fraud, bribery of public officials, and systematic racial discrimination. Ms. Johnson had used her settlement money to start a small cleaning company, hiring only women who had suffered racial discrimination in the workplace. Ms. Williams returned to school, completing the nursing program she had abandoned when she was wrongfully fired. Dr. Roberts had expanded his practice, creating a department specializing in racial discrimination cases. Diana smiled as she read a letter from a young black female journalist who had been fired after investigating municipal corruption. "Your story gave me the courage not to give up," the woman wrote. "I am following in your footsteps and already have enough evidence to expose the mayor." That afternoon, the phone rang. It was Rebecca Chin. "Diana, we just got confirmation. You won the Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism." As she left the office, Diana passed in front of the building that had once been Harrison Properties headquarters. A for rent sign hung in the doorway, and through the windows, she could see empty rooms where an empire built on prejudice and exploitation had once operated. The irony was not lost on her. William Harrison had spent years using his power to make black women invisible in their own lives. In the end, it was precisely this invisibility that allowed Diana to observe, document, and expose every aspect of his corruption without him ever suspecting the danger she posed. True revenge, Diana had learned, was not simply destroying those who had hurt her. It was using that destruction as a foundation to build something much greater, a legacy of justice that would continue to impact lives long after William Harrison's name was forgotten by history. 3 blocks away, in a modest apartment he could barely afford, William watched the evening news. The main story showed Diana receiving an honor at City Hall. He wondered for the 1000th time how he could have been so blind as to completely underestimate the woman who ended up being his undoing. The answer was simple. People like William could never see beyond their own prejudices. It was precisely this limitation that made them so vulnerable to those who dared to be underestimated. If this story of how intelligence and determination can turn injustice into triumph has inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to Black Voices. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't bringing those who hurt you down to your level. It's rising so high that they become irrelevant in the landscape of your success.